Welcome to Writers Not Writing. This used to be a show where I interviewed authors about the ways they procrastinated, and I'm sure we'll still have some of that. But in these times, I want to use this show to highlight artists who are using their voices to push back against fascism. Whether we're writing or not writing, we need to be defending one another. I'm Benjamin Gorman, your friendly author in exile, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer, who hitched a ride in my suitcase. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff, and Doug does his best to make me sound better. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. You're going to enjoy today's show. And if you want a little more, become a patron of my Patreon, help to keep a roof over my head, and you'll get access to an ad-free version of the show with a bonus segment with each interviewee. Okay, here we go.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. Today's guest is Jason Brick. Jason Brick is a writer, dad, martial artist, and a nerd with a debilitating travel habit. And Jason, I have been very excited to have you on to talk travel because you have lived overseas yourself. So tell everybody about your overseas living experience, how that came about.
All right, so it's been a while. My favorite aunt, when she turned 50, she sold all of her stuff and moved to Japan as her 50th birthday present to herself. And she lived there for 13 years. This happened when I was in the middle of college. And once I graduated, she was on the phone with me about once every other month to the tune of, hey, you're not married. Right. You don't have kids. Why are you out here? And so it took her about 2 years to wear me down. And I went out there and I spent the better part of 2 years living in Japan, teaching English. Spent the second year actually coaching a karate team at a local high school, which was a whole other story.
Yeah.
And I met my first wife there. She was actually from Corvallis, 90 minutes south of where I grew up.
That's wild.
It was crazy. You know, it's Japan, right? So a lot of people said it was meant to be. We said, well, we were obligated.
Right.
Right?
The other gaijin.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and then when we came home, we had kids. We decided that, we wanted them to have that experience, travel, especially long-term travel. It makes you a better, braver, bigger person. And we wanted our kids to grow up with that. And so when our youngest was 4 and our oldest was 14, we went and spent a year in Malaysia. And the 14-year-old, we saw what happened with the 14-year-old. He's such a great kid now. And some of that is because he's just a good kid. But a lot of it is that he had that experience and grew up with that larger context. And we wanted that for the younger one too. But the younger one who was 4, he doesn't really remember much. Right. And so 14 was last year, and who needs 8th grade?
Sadly true, yeah.
And so we wrapped up at the end of last summer. We wrapped up a year in Crete because we wanted him to have the full experience as well, and it was great.
And how did the Crete thing work? As far as and this is, I ask very selfishly because I am going through the immigration process myself. How did immigration with Greece pan out? How does that structure work there?
It's astonishing. It is so bad and so slow that one of the early processes of getting the visa is getting an official document that looks a lot like a visa, that is an acknowledgement for the government that you have filed your paperwork in good faith, and they might not get to it for a while.
Is that the apostilled document?
It's called an apostille, or however it's pronounced.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so nobody explained this to me. People out there who know this are just going to, think I'm the biggest idiot. Yeah. So my immigration attorney is like, you're going to need the following documents, and it was this extensive list.
Going, apostille is different. Carry on though.
Yes. So I see these apostilles. I need these, and like a classic arrogant, middle-aged white guy, I go, oh, that's just a translation error. I'm sure that means official. No, it doesn't. No. And so I get together all these official documents, travel to Spain, show up and go, here's everything. And they're like, that's not everything. And getting those apostilles from the United States while you're here is, I don't want to say impossible. It better not be impossible.
It's or we're going to get deported. Difficult.
It's very difficult. We had to go in and get our fingerprints done here, send them to the FBI. So that whole thing is going to be a real process, and we're hopeful it can be done in time. If it's not, people are going to see this background behind me change because we are going to have to leave Spain for 90 days
Yeah.
while the paperwork gets processed, and then we can come back. So it's, I mean,
it's a mess. And you probably will, if not just Spain, you probably have to leave the Schengen.
yes, which means,
Yeah.
this is one benefit of Brexit. We could go to the
Yeah.
UK, which is
Yeah.
outside of the Schengen area, or Morocco. So
Yeah.
I mean,
You
Morocco
got
is an
options.
hour and a half. So we could pop down there. But yeah, I mean, live for 90 days in another place with the dogs and move everything and then come back. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it is going to be a challenge. I hope the U.S. government can move fast enough, but I'm reading in the news that 40,000 people might lose their jobs here, and like
It's
that's the
a
people
mess.
we need to process our
Yeah.
paperwork. So
Yeah.
I am very nervous about that. So how long did it take you to work on the paperwork before
Well,
you went to Crete?
So Greece is astonishingly inefficient with that, and we actually didn't start on the paperwork till we were here because that's what our lawyer told us.
Yeah.
That nobody's going to pick up the phone.
Yep.
Before we get there, so we came with the documents we were pretty sure we needed, and it was about 90% of the documents we needed.
Yeah,
the thing we ran across was the letter that we got from my ex-wife, giving permission for this year-long visa was not worded properly.
Ugh.
And so we had to go back and forth. And an apostille is kind of like a notary plus plus.
Yes, it's an international
Yeah.
notary. That's a good way to describe it. Like it's the way countries require the notarization to be done.
Exactly. And so we had to go get that apostille. Now there are services in the States that'll do it for like $100.
Yeah.
So that might help you. Yeah. The document we're talking about was actually, it's kind of like a not quite a visa, because Greece takes so long to process your visas that you need a form saying, hey, I did my part.
Right.
They're catching up. We never got a visa in the year that we lived there. I got my my thing that said, hey, we're working on the visa. And I can't remember what it's called right now. And when we've been there for 4 months, my wife got it a month before we left, and my son never got it. It was astonishingly slow and frustrating. And that was with the help of a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah. It is quite challenging. And the kind of, I don't want to say pretext, the premise of your visa was you guys purchased a home in Crete, right? Is that the way?
No, no, that's we came in on digital nomad business owner.
That's what we're on to.
Visas, yeah. The golden visa in Greece while we were living there was $250,000 with a real estate purchase.
And that purchase cannot be on a mortgage. You must put it down in cash.
Yes, it's a cash purchase.
Yeah, so that
and it just went up to like 600,000, I heard, which is too bad because there goes my retirement plan.
Right. So yeah, they're making it. A lot of countries are saying we don't want an influx of immigrants at all, especially Americans right now, and I understand why.
Yeah. I mean, they don't mind American cash, but you got to come with skills or cash.
Yeah, the digital nomad deal is really good for them because basically you come in and say, I promise to be paid by someone outside of this country, but spend my money in this country.
Yeah.
And they're like, great, you're just an influx of cash. Okay.
Yeah.
So I see why they like that bargain. It works really well for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all an interesting mess, but it's an adventure, and adventures are good.
Yes. Well, and of those places you've lived, what are some of those things where you didn't know them till you were there? You didn't know it could be different until you went, oh my gosh, they can do this. They do it this way in Japan. And it's those little subtle things, that those are the ones that strike me. I mean, people know, the food will be different. Oh yeah. Those are obvious. But the ones that I think are the most interesting for people who are back stateside, who've not had the opportunity to travel, is the stuff they've not even considered.
Yeah. There's two really good examples. One of them is in Crete, and I experienced this in Italy as well, and in Spain to a lesser extent. It's really hard to get the check at the end of a meal.
Yeah.
Because they feel like coming to you and bringing you the check, or even asking if you want a refill or another beer, is rushing you in your experience of a meal, which should be this thing that you celebrate as a family. And so they leave you alone. And for the first couple of weeks, I perceived that as poor service.
Right.
But then I developed some friends there and talked about it a little bit, and it was, they're being polite.
Yeah.
And so
you're supposed to take a couple hours and just enjoy your food
and not be bothered.
Yeah.
Like if the exception being that often, and if it was a smaller restaurant, the owner will come out and chat with the foreigners for a bit, but that's very different too.
Yeah. And they're
And
not bringing you the check. They're just there to gab.
No, exactly. And so that's one example. Another example was when we went to Malaysia, and this was with an adorable North American 4-year-old. They touch your kids. And I don't mean in a Catholic church sense. I mean, they'll like pat your kid's head. They'll pick up, like we went to so many restaurants where the waitress would pick up my 4-year-old and carry him around and show to the other staff and family members. Like, could you imagine somebody doing that at a Denny's in Sheboygan?
Yeah, Americans would absolutely freak out.
And it took a bit for me not to.
Yeah. Yeah, my folks were in Korea recently, and they were up at some like resort mountain, vista, like go on a hike kind of a thing. And they're at this little restaurant with this amazing view, and they look over at the table next to them, and there was this, couple, a young Korean couple, and they had their laptops and stuff, and they were, working there at the table. And then they decided to go for a hike, and they just left their stuff.
Yeah.
And so my folks call over the waiter, and they're like, these people left their computers and backpacks. And the waiter's like, oh yeah, that's very normal here. They're going to go for a walk. They'll be back. And, my folks were like, but aren't they worried stuff will get stolen? And the waiter was like, that would never happen here.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's one of those things where, and that's not true of everywhere. Travelers, please don't feel you can leave your stuff out everywhere you go. But there are places in the world where that's just unheard of. You could just leave a computer on a table and come back for it later. So
very, very similarly, when I went to Japan, I was 28 when I went there. And this was after I was a 2nd degree black belt. I'd had a brief, fun, but not particularly vaunted fight career. I was that guy. And, you go out to work after dinner with your people and you drink till 2 a.m. You get up and go back to work. That's just what you do. And I'd been there a couple of weeks when a friend of mine who'd been there long pulls me and said, dude, you were creeping out all the women. I'm like, well, how am I creeping out the women? I'm sorry. What am I doing? Well, you keep offering to walk them home. A young woman gets up stands up from the table at 2 a.m. to walk home. And to me, it's just polite for me to say, hey, do you need a walk home?
Right.
But it's so safe that it was perceived as me hitting on them.
That is fascinating. I mean, I can see both sides of that.
Totally unnecessary.
Like, you're going, I'm trying to be protective. No, you are actually soliciting.
Yeah. And it had to be explained to me because it was so, but as you say, it's different.
Right.
And it's, I think, better, although some of the reasons why they're so safe is pretty poisonous in both of those places. And the ways they're not safe are in some ways worse than the way women aren't safe here. Yeah. But it's just those little differences. And it's fascinating to me.
One of the things that's been really interesting to me here is when you turn on the evening news in Spain, almost all the stories are about some, crime that happened. And so the people here, and I've heard this in conversation with a couple of folks, will talk about, it's dangerous in Barcelona, or it's dangerous in this neighborhood of Barcelona. You should be frightened. And there's absolutely an element of racism in it. It's this is the Arab neighborhood, or this is this other neighborhood. It's dangerous. You look up the crime statistics, and it is laughable. The murder rate in the entire city of Barcelona is lower than in the small town in Oregon where I lived. If the small town in Oregon where I lived has 1 murder a year. Like, this is an incredibly safe place, but our perceptions of safety are relative to our own, the media we're consuming, that kind of thing. And so the people here are going, there was a home invasion robbery in Madrid 3 hours away. It's on the news for 3 days straight, and it's this huge deal. And people are like, that's a shocking crime. Oh, the country's going to the dogs. And I'm going, 1 home invasion robbery is national news. You're living in a very safe place relative to the United States. So that's been that has been interesting, and I want to be sensitive to my spouse and her kid, and not say, oh yeah, you can walk down dark alleys and stuff. Like, their instincts are still valid, and at the same time I'm like, but we're in a really safe place here. I love the little dark alleys. Like that has been one of my
Mhm.
favorite things about Barcelona is this,
Yeah.
especially this neighborhood we're in, the Gothic quarter, is this is medieval Europe. Like this
Yeah.
is these streets that are, where I can touch both sides and they've got arches over the top and they're between
Yeah.
buildings and they're dark. And it is so cool. Like I love the
Yeah.
look of it. And we'll be walking by one and I'll like point it out and go, oh my gosh, I should take a picture. Isn't this cool? And my my wife and kid are like, it's a creepy dark alley. Like as
Yeah.
as the woman and a non-binary person, they don't think creepy dark alleys are happy fun places to like check out. And I'm like, but it looks so cool, and then I have to
Yeah.
kind of check myself and go, oh yeah, it's a little safer for me than it is for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of safety,
Yeah.
that brings me to the work you've been doing. So
Mhm.
you have been doing a ton of stuff with safety,
Yeah.
with your Safest Family on the Block kind of program. And I saw you're about to go
Mhm.
do some speaking in, is it
Mhm.
Spokane?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell everybody about the Safest Family on the Block program.
All right. So Safest Family on the Block was my personal COVID seizure. I think a lot of people had a creative or entrepreneurial idea during COVID, and this was mine. And it came from, I mentioned earlier that I've been a martial artist my whole life. I spent until I was 37, that was my career. Then I transitioned from that into journalism. And along the way, I had a couple of kids, had a couple of wives. That's not a way more cavalier than either of those
Right.
things are. That I really liked being married to. I love being married to my wife now, and I liked being married to my ex-wife for most of that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But that's just I want to give due respect to them because
Yeah.
that was a little flip. But um, and along the way, I became aware of the safety factors that a lot of parents face, and there were some specific events in my martial arts career that really put that into stark relief for me. And then I had my COVID seizure about it by seeing a couple of family safety channels that were really being done poorly. And so I turned the context, the lens that I have of having been a martial artist and a security professional, and then a journalist who does interviews, and a parent who's been field testing stuff and has an opportunity to test things on their kids, and started interviewing experts on family safety. And one of the ways that my show differs from a lot of shows is most of the family safety podcasts and programs out there are all about crime prevention. And that's important, although, if you look at the statistics, it's a very small part.
Right.
And so I'll have a police officer or a Navy SEAL on to talk to you about those things, but also I'll have a fire marshal on, or a suicide counselor, or a nutritionist. I had a lady from AAA come on just to talk to us about what emergency supplies you should keep in your car. So every aspect of family safety I could find somebody smarter than me to talk to me about, I found, and I talked to them about it.
I think that risk assessment is so important. We think this is the danger because it's the most dramatic. And you don't want to say to somebody, don't worry about that. One of the examples that always comes to mind for me is kidnapping. And people will, when especially when you have young children, you're so afraid, oh, this stranger is going to kidnap my child. And you don't want to say to somebody, you shouldn't worry about that, because if it happened to you, yes, it would absolutely be awful. The odds of it happening are vanishingly small. And if your child is kidnapped, it's going to be by a family member. Like that's, it's not going to be this total stranger. That's a freak occurrence. Whereas the really dangerous things in your house are, the bottle of pills that you didn't put away properly, and the firearm that you didn't lock up. And, like those things are far more dangerous than a stranger kidnapping your child. But we don't assess risk based on stats. We go based on feelings.
Yeah. And that's part of the mission of the show. I'm thrilled that you mentioned stranger danger, because of course that is the worst, most damaging child safety myth that our culture has. The statistics are wild about how, strangers do abduct children, but it happens this tiny amount of the time. And not only does it happen a tiny amount of the time, meaning that the person is going to hurt your kid, if somebody hurts your kid, already. And so the overwhelming amount of harm to children comes from people they know. And the overwhelming number of strangers are good people who don't hurt kids.
Exactly.
So if we tell them if we only tell them don't talk to strangers, they not only aren't watching the right corners for danger, but we've deprived them of this enormous ubiquitous safety resource.
Yeah. look to a stranger. They're
Yeah.
going to be the one who will, call
Yeah.
Child Protective Services, call the police.
Yeah.
We need to teach our kids you can go to someone else.
Yeah. And there's some very specific ways to
you
do
have
it
to just
too.
endure whatever kind of abuse because you can't tell anyone because they're all dangerous.
Yeah. And it's ridiculous. And there are ways to train our kids to go to strangers for help. And one thing that a way I like to say it is, if your child needs help, they have to talk to a stranger.
Yeah.
Because if there was anybody around that they knew and could trust, they wouldn't need help. They would be getting help.
Yeah.
So they need to participate in their own rescue. And what I teach younger children is, if you can't find your family, go find someone else's family.
Yeah.
An adult in the company of other children is statistically unlikely to be somebody who harms strangers' children.
Right.
There might be something going on with their own family, but that's a whole other deeply depressing subject.
Right.
And also, the people who are in public with kids will usually stop at nothing short of endangering one of those children to reunite a child with their people.
Right. Yes. Oh my God. As a parent, like you see a kid who's lost and everything stops. We were at Comic-Con this last year, and Crystal found a kid who was freaking out, had lost their mom. And I'm going to run down Comic-Con a little bit because I'm not there anymore and won't be doing Rose City Comic-Con anymore. It was their handling of it was really poor. It was not clear which security guard should deal with it, and to the security guards themselves. And one of them was just like, "I'll take the kid," and Crystal was like, "Oh no, you won't, sir. I am not leaving this kid until I know they are safe."
Yeah.
And they didn't do the thing they're supposed to do, where they closed down the building. Because they're too worried, and they didn't put out kind of an all call. They were just like, "Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine," in this very large facility. And then the way that the place was designed, it was not clear what was the info desk. They had a bunch of info desks, and so when they finally did get the kid when Crystal did the legwork of getting this kid to the right place, the mom was, of course, there and panicked and a wreck, but she had done what any parent would think to do and gone to the right place and was trying to reach out, and they were so poorly organized they weren't able to say, "This is where your kid will come," even once it was like, "Oh, it's on the walkie-talkie." And so I mean, your advice is excellent. Find that person who's a mom like Crystal, who's going to go, "You're now my project. Getting you back to your mom is now everything that I'm going to devote my time to for the next couple of hours, no matter what." But she was so angry at their system.
Yeah. And that's and you can practice with your kids, because remember, a plan you don't practice isn't a plan. It's a wish. And so every once in a while, you're standing in line at the supermarket, you're sitting at the restaurant, you're waiting for the movies to start. You just say, "Hey, if I wasn't around and you need help, which of these people would you go to for help?"
Yeah.
And then you have a conversation about why, and maybe disqualify the families. And then you can talk about, so what is it? Because you remember, our gut instinct is our best protector. We've spent, one second, someone's trying to call me and I'm going to tell them not to. We've been involving our gut instincts to survive since before we were Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
And we're still badass survival machines. And a lot of human society takes that survival machine that enters kindergarten and tries to beat out of them through courtesy and the following the rules and making things organized, beat that out of you.
Yeah.
And so talking to your kids about, okay, so why do you think that person's safe instead of that person? And talk about the cues. What you don't like the way they're looking at the waitress. You don't like the way that they're standing. And then you can also talk about biases there. Maybe that they've been watching the wrong TV shows for too long, and despite our best efforts, they're not sure because that person's got a headdress on of some sort that matched the terrorist on TV last night.
Right.
Or maybe they look like, it's a table full of people ready to go to a punk concert, who, by the way, are reliably some of the nicest humans on the planet. Exactly. But they look scary as hell.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And so you can both talk about safety and address any implicit biases that are popping up with that simple conversation at the restaurant about, "Hey, who here would you go for help?"
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one time we were at a Burgerville, and there was a guy who had a teardrop tattoo, and Noah was my son was, like maybe 3, and he started like pointing at the guy and laughing, and he's like, "Ha
Oh
ha,
no.
he's crying," and I was like, "We're all going to die." Yeah, that's maybe not the guy to make fun of.
No,
But
no.
who knows? Like you said, I mean, it
Yeah.
could be the guy is now the sweetest guy in the
Hmm.
world, and would
Yeah.
and would not hurt a 3-year-old,
Hmm. Yeah.
but yeah, learning to get beyond those biases
Hmm.
is,
Yeah.
and at the same time recognize if somebody is using a tattoo to telegraph I have killed people, maybe you
Hmm.
want to stay away from that person.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
went out of their way to make that clear. But
Yeah.
yeah, this those biases are
Yeah.
also evolutionary.
Yeah.
It's the this person might not be from my group, and I need to find my group, and learning to get beyond those, to
Yeah.
recognize those and not feel guilty for them, and instead say, oh, I recognize I have this bias and it's irrational and it's outdated, and now
Yeah.
I can move beyond that.
Yeah.
That is challenging, more so for adults.
Hmm.
Kids are pretty
Yeah.
good at that. Like you can say, Noah was so great when he was little.
Yeah.
He was like, people will say, oh, I don't see race, and it's like, yeah, bullshit. Like
Yeah.
you have, that's actually offensive. People's races matter, you should recognize them. But Noah was genuinely like racially blind, except when it came to hair color. That was the distinction that he made when he was very young. So he would see somebody who was of a different race but had brown hair, and he would be like, he's my group. Whereas somebody who was blonde was the other group. And it was because the cartoons he was watching, all the kids were of different races, but they were all each of different hairstyles. Like we were watching like a lot of Little Einsteins or something. And he was like, no, the kid who has the short brown hair, who was the black kid on the show, was Noah's kid that he identified with. And so then he decided everybody who's got short brown hair is me. And I was like, this is not bad. let's foster this, and I was like, and so to him, I was Mace Windu, because bald guy, and I was like, you know what, if you want to see your father as Mace Windu, I am totally cool with that. That did not persist, unfortunately, but it was nice while it lasted. So
that day you realize you're no longer a superhero. Kind of sucks.
Now he would just be like, no, Dad, that's not gonna fly. So I'm in this show, I want to make sure that I am recognizing that the country that I used to live in, the country you still live in, has changed. And so the focus of the show, used to just be all lighthearted, hey, how are you procrastinating from your work? But I want to recognize there's a lot going on. And so how are you, as a writer and as a citizen and as a member of a community, how are you pushing back, and are there some ideas you can share with our listeners that they can benefit from in that way too?
So I have 2 answers for that question, and the first one is my family. We're a white nuclear middle class family, and we're in the Pacific Northwest. We have more leeway, more space to move and be than a lot of people. And, we can pass. And so we're keeping an eye out, and we're managing certain supply lines, but mostly we're being here to support people who are in deeper peril. I have several friends who have decided that they need to get out of the country, at least for the next 4 years. And we've helped them in various ways with the logistics, whether it's helping them move some of their stuff, store some of their stuff. I've got another friend who I'm helping them manage some apostille stuff, because you got to hand it in person, but you can have an agent do that, things like that. So we're helping our friends, and we've increased the number of family dinners we have here, where a lot of our people can come and join and talk and get support and love.
Yeah.
And we're also keeping an eye out specifically. There's a lot going on. There's a lot, and that's part of their plan. They've done 200 executive orders on the first day, so that you don't see the important ones.
Yeah.
There are 2 that I'm keeping a very specific eye on. And so far, the results of what's happened there are leaving me guardedly optimistic. But that game is not over yet. We're not even at halftime.
Yeah.
And specifically, there the birthright citizenship.
Yes.
Because that is plainly and clearly unconstitutional.
Yeah.
The grounds that they're trying to throw it on have been dismissed again and again and again. The Supreme Court is deeply conservative, but they have shown also that they are not Donald Trump's personal puppet enough times. So what they do when it bubbles up to there is going to tell me a lot about how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And then the other one is now that the 1600 January 6th protest has been released, I'll put it this way. I'm looking to see if there's going to be a run on brown shirts.
Yeah.
And so far, the courts have been just absolutely blistering about birthright citizenship. And the January 6th protesters who have been released are getting in more trouble than they're causing.
Yeah.
So both of those things have me more optimistic than I was, but those are the two kind of bellwether cases that I'm watching.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm going to be looking for there is, does Trump start to use his pardon power to reinforce that kind of brown shirtism? So a J6 person gets out, gets in, to criminal trouble, and then gets pardoned again. That's going to send a really strong signal to those folks. Hey, you can keep doing this stuff because you've got carte blanche now. If Trump goes, no, I don't actually care about any of you. This was all just a thing that I yelled from the stage, and I'm not going to actually empower you in any way, then everyone will be safer due to his callousness towards his own followers. So, we'll see.
And we haven't yet seen I think a dozen of them have already gone back to jail.
I know,
but they're all going back to jail for being dipshits.
Yep. It's stupid stuff.
Yeah. Nothing yet has happened where they went to jail for some act of political violence.
Right.
And then what happens to that dude?
Yep.
That's going to tell us a lot.
So that's my first answer to keep out for.
Yeah. That's my first answer to the question. The second one is that, so giving details about some of the specific ways we're preparing for if things go fully sideways, talking about that on a public podcast would be bad OPSEC.
Yes.
So I'm not going to do that. However,
no, I think that, but let's talk about why.
Yeah.
I think that's really important too, to think about, hey, some of what you will have to do out there as you are doing this planning is figure out how to do this planning secretively.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of folks who are, switching the messaging services they are using, who are switching their email from an email address that is owned by a corporation. And, the benefit of it is they give it to you for free. No, they give it to you in exchange for your information. And instead, if you get one that you have to pay for, you can get, email that's very secure, things like that. So figuring out how to manage your own communication so that you can be doing some of this planning in ways that is not incredibly obvious in public, I think is really wise.
It's you got to take care of it. Of course, it's virtually impossible to make the right decision. So on the one hand, don't use Gmail because, they sell your information. On the other hand, Gmail has the money to fight the federal government. Go with a little local service run by a guy who's really serious about privacy. He does not have the money to beat that subpoena. You just have to be very careful. And then, but all of that, the thing is, I'm not going to talk about details, but we have a plan and we have the means to execute that plan. And I encourage everybody to find their team and do the same.
Yeah.
Whatever your family constellation, whatever your series of check boxes on the equal opportunity questionnaire leaves you to feel vulnerable, afraid, powerful, angry, whatever those things are, find your team, make your plan.
Yeah. And that planning is detailed and leveled. What is it we can do today? And what is it we can really think through so that this isn't a wish? Like you said, maybe at some point we will hope to help others, but okay, if person X ends up in crisis Y, what will we actually do? And do we have the means? Do we have the tools? Do we have have we mapped it out? Do we know how this is going to work? I think that's really, really smart. It's also good for you psychologically. When you're getting frustrated and you're going, I feel powerless, you can be making a plan. And that can be, at least I did something today. I didn't just, doom scroll.
Yeah, and you make that plan, and then you identify the holes that need filling, right?
Yeah.
Like a hole that needs filling that some of my friends have that I'm on a lot of speed dials because I'm a middle-aged white guy who speaks cop.
Right.
They are less likely to try to push past me into a door when they don't have a warrant than a lot of people. And I don't. And so you find your middle-aged white guy who speaks cop.
Yeah.
You find your person who understands tech well enough to figure out how to have communications that can't be subpoenaed. Weirdly, this is all family safety stuff.
I mean, but
Yeah.
not weirdly. That's very much why I wanted to have you on.
Yeah.
So much of the family safety stuff that you've been
Mhm.
working on for years is
Yeah.
not, this is how you become a 12th degree black belt. It's this is how you de-escalate a situation,
Yeah.
and this is how you plan for a situation so that you can, protect yourself and protect others preemptively.
Yeah. The thing about planning on in all of these things, and I think a lot of us have been experiencing this since November, is when you're under stress, the first thing that goes is your higher order thinking skills. Your body literally pulls the blood out of that part of your brain and puts it to the parts that keep your heart pumping and keep your muscles moving. And if you're trying to come up with a plan during that time, you're dumber than you were. And that's a bad time to come up with a plan. So you come up with a plan ahead of time and you rehearse that plan enough that you can remember it in the moment.
Yeah.
And then it happens. This is a little bragging on myself, but it illustrates the point. I've been training for a very long time, and it's been a very, very long time since I was in any kind of tussle. But this last summer I was assaulted when we were in Turkey. And the first decision I made in what happened next was where to put that guy's skull when I was putting him on the ground. Yeah. Deciding not to bounce it off of a stone step, but rather put him gently on the alley floor and tell them to please stop.
Yeah.
And that's the level of training, of planning and practice you want for any emergency situation, that you are making decisions after you are in effective motion.
Yeah. Well, and one of the points you have made to me before on the show, actually, but worth revisiting is, and I'm going to get the wording not quite right, but it was something to the effect of, we don't rise to the level of, how did you word that?
People don't rise to the occasion, they fall to the level of training.
And that is so important, folks. What are you going to do when your brain is not working at its finest? What are you going to resort to because you know how to do it? You've been trained to do it. You've practiced it. Not, in the moment, I will suddenly elevate my game. Yeah. That's not the way crises work.
In the moment, I'm going to figure out where in this gigantic conference of a lot of people wearing masks to go to find my child. Right. And trust my child to remember to walk up to an adult with 3 children around them and ask for help. Right. If we've never discussed it or maybe thought about it once listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
You got to take that time to practice and drill and train.
Yeah.
And the other thing about practicing, drilling, and training is if you do it right, it's fun, but also you'll find the holes.
Yeah.
You'll find an example I'm going to tell on myself. This was years ago, building the fire plan when my youngest child was still an infant and across the hall from our bedroom. And we had fire extinguishers, one in the garage, one in the kitchen, one in one hallway where all the rest of the bedrooms were, one in our hallway where the master bedroom and a bonus room that had become the nursery was. And I just put it right there in the hall. And then we're practicing various things. And we decided, okay, let's practice a scenario where there's a fire in the general area. So what if the hall's on fire? Yeah. How do I get the fire extinguisher and then put out the fire enough to get to my kid?
Right.
So then we moved that fire extinguisher to inside the master bedroom.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So little
fire
things like that.
Extinguisher was always in the pantry right next to the oven. What is the place that is most likely to have the fire start in the house?
Yeah.
That is where we need the fire extinguisher. So thinking things through, where should the carbon monoxide detectors go? Well, where does carbon monoxide go? So
all those little things.
But they're
those practice, that rehearsal identifies those things.
Well, and I think your point about it should be fun. Also, for so many, when I use this phrase, people out there listening to it are going to go, oh, and yet they're going to be thinking of different things. The talk, for us as, cishet white guys, the talk was the sex talk, right? And for people of color, the talk is, what are you going to do when the police come along and you have to behave in a certain way? Well, if we're willing to have these conversations about safety, we take away the kind of fear of having this one awful conversation. Yeah. It becomes normal to talk more with your children, with your family.
Normalize talking about those things.
Yep.
Normalizing, you're talking about sex in one way or another from, when you're talking about their body parts changing their diaper.
Yep.
Using a little pro trick that I learned from somebody who's an SVU captain in Jersey. You identify one word for it for each of the anatomical parts, and it can be strictly anatomical. It can be your family slang term. It doesn't matter, but it's one word and one word only. And that way, when your kid shows up using a different word for it, you ask where they heard it.
Where'd you learn that? Yeah, that's good advice.
Just a little one, just a little thing like that. But yeah, and the other thing about that, and I think this is hugely important, is normalize the hard conversations. And normalize not freaking out when they bring you bad news. That when your kid comes home and he's got a C, or your kid comes home and they went to the principal's office, I think most of us were raised that the parents are going to make your bad day worse.
Yes.
If you make a mistake in the world. And, we should raise kids to recognize boundaries, to respect boundaries, to face consequences of their mistakes with maturity and courage. But also they should know that we're going to be on their side.
Right.
That depending on your relationship, you're going to be holding their hand all the way to the principal's office when they're reporting for detention. Or if you got that relationship with your teenagers, you're going, hey, was that the smartest thing you did today?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Whatever that vibe is with your kids, but that you're steadfastly on their side, no matter how bad they screw up. And if you do that from, the first playground fight, the first C on the report card, when they're like, dude, I think I trusted the wrong guys and I might have just been a getaway driver. Or I'm not sure my boyfriend's not abusive. They're going to trust you not to freak out about those phone conversations too.
Yeah. Well, and in those moments, especially when somebody has been victimized, part of what they are feeling is shame. I was stupid and I ended up with the wrong person. And I feel dumb for having dated this person for this long and not having seen these red flags, and creating the place where I'm the person you come to talk to about red flags. Like that this is a conversation we had before you were dating this person. We joke about it. We talk about it so that as you start to notice those, I'm the person you call. That's so much healthier than, I want my son to feel like, hey, when I have messed up, the person I call is my dad. Rather than when I have messed up, I can't tell my dad. It's so much healthier, because often the biggest danger to a person is they feel they've messed up when in fact they've been victimized by someone else. And so if we can create that regular conversation, it's so important.
Absolutely.
You're dealing with some heavy stuff. You're going up, you're doing your safest family on the block stuff. You've got, I don't know, your country's descent into chaos. How do you get away from that right now? What's been a source of some relief?
I'm a training junkie. So I've been upping my interaction with the martial arts community and the nationwide, and going to a lot more training events and things like that. And that's a little sketchy, because about half of the martial arts community is very conservative. They're Christian military people. And about half the martial arts community is a bunch of hippies who like Aikido. There's not a lot of middle ground, and everybody's really passionate. Fortunately, they also, because they have this shared discipline of the martial arts, and they're spending the time in a room where you are encouraged to hit people. Most people are simmer down, but it can be tough not to just, you're at dinner afterward and somebody's just talking such nonsense. It's not even offensive. It's anthropomorphic. It's anthropological. And you're like, and to not call them out, it's difficult. But besides that, I'm doing the training, and also I'm playing a lot of D&D.
Which is another great community building. I mean, it's literally shared storytelling for the purpose of community building as fun. Like
it is. And I got my regular game going. My son's got a game going. I actually got to guest GM on a day for him at the end of the semester, and that was fun. And then I'm also playing a whole lot of this D&D video game, not Baldur's Gate. But it's a junior varsity version, but it's the same game with the serial numbers filed off very lightly. But I do a lot of that as my other hobby, because I'm a nerd.
Yes, I have always struggled to find a
Mhm.
game, and I know that online now there are lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, for people like me whose schedules are really wacky,
Hmm.
Baldur's Gate is so great because it
Yeah.
really is. They've gotten now to the point where it's randomized and the
Hmm.
storytelling is at that
Yeah.
level and the acting and stuff. So that's been great. I also love a good D&D podcast.
Yeah.
So I've been listening to Not Another D&D podcast, which is
Mm.
a bunch of comedians who do a D&D podcast, and
Yeah.
it's hilarious. And for us as authors, it's
Mhm.
like modeling good writing. Like there's stuff where I'm like,
Yeah.
what the DM just did there, that's something I need to consider. Like that was a cool,
Hmm.
not just turn of phrase, but like the way they described entering that space, that worked
Yeah.
really well. Like there's a lot that can be gleaned. Not that I'm stealing from Murph. I may end up stealing.
Absolutely steal.
Yeah.
Good artist borrow, great artist steal.
Yes.
Absolutely steal.
Yes.
Uh,
Well, let's go to our commercial break, and when we
yeah.
come back, I'm going to ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately.
Uh,
Hey, readers and reviewers. I want to put out an all call for guests who are fighting back against fascism. If you know an author or artist of any kind who is using their art or their platform to push back, especially if they are doing so in an interesting way that deserves more attention and support, share this show with them and encourage them to email NotAPipePublishing at NotAPipePublishing@gmail.com, and we'll get them scheduled. And if you're looking for inspiring or practical ways you can push back, be sure to subscribe to the show so you catch all the great guests folks are going to recommend. See you here each week.
You deserve a vacation.
How about a trip to a dude ranch on a colony planet?
Or a journey to a universe where wizards call lightning down from the sky and calm rumbling volcanoes?
Or a holiday tour of the major cities of Europe with vampires and werewolves and witches as guides.
Or maybe just a nice hot sudsy bath with a book of poetry that will make you cry and sigh and laugh.
We've got you covered.
A paperback will appear on your doorstep each month to whisk you away, and you'll return refreshed, enlightened, and ready to make the world we share a brighter place for everyone.
Or if you prefer, you can sign up for a quarterly subscription and get 4 YA titles, 4 adult titles, or 4 collections of poetry per year.
Plus, you'll get book club questions from the author before you start the book and an interview with the author afterwards.
So, if you are in a book group or want to start one, this is everything you need in a kit. Will we occasionally throw in some extra surprises just to say thank you to our members? Of course.
You can also give someone their very own membership with all of the rights and privileges pertaining thereto.
So, find a reward level that's right for you.
And share this with your friends.
Join the Indulge Your Shelf book club today. Your bookshelves deserve a little pampering.
Hello, my name is Fred Gambino. I've worked in the story industry for 4 decades as a film and game concept artist and a book cover artist. My love of story has led me to write my debut novel, Dark Shepherd, to be published by Newcom Press in May 2024. A fast-paced science fiction action thriller, it opens on the beach, where starships are crashed from orbit in order to break them up. Breel is in charge of several giant dismantling machines, and her job is to further take apart the shattered ships. Semi-freelance, she is one of many teams who work the beach, making money on the load she collects and sends to central processing. But the beach is a difficult place. Subject to misogyny and racism, she is unjustly fired, setting off a sequence of events that leads to her fleeing across the galaxy in the company of a ragtag group of misfits, pursued by agents of the ruthless and politically powerful Church of Second Light for a secret she didn't know she possessed. Only Breel can locate a mysterious rip, a wormhole that will leave humanity vulnerable to an ancient enemy, and only she stands a chance of closing it. Available for pre-order now at www.newcompress.co.uk.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Jason Brick, author and the host and creator of Safest Family on the Block. Jason, what is something you've been daydreaming about lately?
Oh, Lordy, other than wishing that we weren't in the political climate we are in now. So 2 big things. One is I think we've talked before about my enduring love of heavy metal. There's a band called Bloodywood they're a thrash metal band, new metal band out of New Delhi. And they've been popular. They've been up and coming for about 5 or 6 years now. Started with some kind of joke heavy metal covers of folk songs. Started dropping some of their own stuff and just slowly building as an internet sensation. Went to Vakken, I think 5 years ago now, and filled to capacity a 10,000 person tent with only 2 songs on the internet. And they're just continuing to grow, and their music is crushing, but also incorporates a lot of traditional Indian instrumentation and songwriting. So, you'll be having a blast beat drum solo with like a guitar, and behind that the and it's really fun music. And a lot of their lyrics are very uplifting. It's like it's reminiscent of Rage Against the Machine in terms of their political content. They also these are young men now. I mean, now they're in their early 30s, but they were in their mid 20s, and one of their childhood dogs died, so they wrote a power ballad about how much he loved his dog.
Yeah,
and then they took the money from the YouTube video and bought an ambulance for a local animal shelter.
Nice. Yes.
So they're nice kids, and they're starting to drop songs from their new album, and their new tour is coming up, and I'm daydreaming about when that tour shows up so I can get back in the pit.
Yes.
When they were in town a couple of years ago, I brought my oldest son and his 3 friends, and I threw one of his friends in the mosh pit because he clearly wanted to get in there but wasn't quite ready.
Yeah. Yes.
And yeah, they're if you like heavy metal at all, I encourage you to check out Bloodywood. Their most recent song is just an absolutely crushing song about how yummy Indian food is.
Which is some of my favorite foods. So the thing is, I will listen to that. I will absolutely listen to that song, and then every time I have Indian food, I will be humming that song to myself. And,
no, the reviews for that one have been funny. They almost universally use a word like "this crushes," "this slaps," "this is so hard," and every single one of them ends saying something about "I'm hungry."
Yes. Nice.
Yeah, so I've been daydreaming about that, and then also Rachel and I are already beginning to lay groundwork for our next international expedition, and we're looking at Kenya.
Ooh, yeah, that would be cool. Do you have interest in climbing Kilimanjaro?
So I once thought about mountain climbing, and then I read Into Thin Air.
So Kilimanjaro, this is my understanding from a friend of mine who did it in college, is not climbing.
Yeah,
it's a long, slow climb.
Yeah.
So it's so do some looking into that one, because
my understanding, based on the people I know who've done climbing and the middle altitude climbing I've done, I've gone up to about 9,000 feet, is climbing a mountain is going on a hike with the flu.
Yeah.
And that doesn't sound fun to me.
Yeah. But the cool thing, the reason I someday want to Kilimanjaro is it is not in this, Rocky Mountain range where when you get to the top, you get to see these cool mountains. It is above a plain. Like you get up there and you can just see everything. Yeah. So at least go to the foot of Kilimanjaro and decide if you want. But
if we end up going there, I'm not going to go all that way not to climb some of Kilimanjaro. But mountain climbing is not my bag. I used to be a big rock climber, but mountain climbing is. I don't like hiking in general. I'm active in other ways, and I'll walk an endless amount of distance to go see something interesting, but I've never quite understood, even though I live in Oregon and I'll probably be deported from the state for admitting it.
Yeah, not liking hiking.
Just going for a walk.
But I mean, you live in a great state for climbing too. My problem with climbing is it requires upper body strength.
But it develops upper body strength.
I mean, yes, but hiking doesn't. Hiking is a nice walk, and so hiking is my speed. And I love urban hiking. Like, living here, we don't have a car. I can just go, okay, today we're going to walk, miles and miles and miles. Oh, it's an hour to the store. Yeah. Let's walk. So that's been really nice.
That's a fair point. I think maybe I'm been lying all these years about not liking hiking because I like urban hiking. I think maybe I'm just more interested in cities than I am in nature.
Well, and I don't think there's any shame in that. There's a lot to see in a city. There's people and there's languages and there's, and so, I'd love to just go walk through the city, the architecture. Yeah. Like I'm walking, Barcelona, I am spoiled in that regard. Yeah. It's like building by building by building, the architectural style changes. And they were really like, it's not accidental. It's not like, oh, this neighborhood was this age, and then it was like,
Yeah.
no, we're building a new building. This would be fun. Let's do this one in whatever is the style now. 10 years later, when we're building the building, and so it's as you're walking down the street, it's every building is in, is got its own little style.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love just that's a great hike for me, is checking out the kind of art and architecture of a city.
That's fair.
So, so as you are thinking about Kenya, I mean, what are you looking forward to? That I think that would be a wonderful experience.
So I like being, I like my home. I like my people. Most of my people and all of my stuff's here in Hillsboro, Oregon. But I do like getting out and being in different places with different people, different experiences, different food, people who don't look like me and sound like me. It's interesting, and it grows us, and it's an important part of how I exist in the world. And so Kenya is different from the Pacific Northwest, and it's different from Crete, and it's different from Japan, and it's different from Malaysia. I'm excited to find out about that.
Yeah. Oh, that would be a very cool experience. I don't know much about, cost of living, cost of travel there, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Getting there's pricey, being there's cheap.
Okay.
And it says, when we're first doing, we kind of decided Africa, because, we're planning to do this every 5 years or so now that the kids are, after this next one, our youngest will be grown and in college. Yeah. And we're just kind of looking at things and figuring, if we do a year in Africa, it should probably be this time, because I'm in my 50s, and it's it's not the safest part of the world. And, I don't want to be going to sketchy places in my 70s.
Right.
So it's this time. So we're looking at that. And I did some research. I have some very good contacts who work as bodyguards and travel writers. It's a weird kind of part of my career. So I have people who can tell me what's what.
Yeah.
And, the safest places in Africa were Mauritius. I always mess it up. But that little island off the coast there, which isn't Africa the way I'm envisioning spending time in Africa. And then the next safest is Morocco.
Yeah.
Which, again, that is a Mediterranean country that happens to be on Africa.
Right.
And we were just in the Mediterranean. And then the next safest one right now is Kenya.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who lives in South Africa, and not safe right now. The murder rate, it's a country that is dealing with, its history, and those things don't go away overnight. And so the difference between wealthy and poor, and the racial differences manifest in a lot of violence. And so that one, I don't know that I would recommend, based on his experience anyway, going to live there. I think it would be a cool place to, just about anywhere in the world I would go see, but I don't think I would want to live in South Africa right now.
No.
So as you are doing all this stuff, where can folks follow you? Because you're a good follow. Where's the best place to keep track of all that you've been doing?
Facebook's the best place. You can find my show on YouTube, although I took a hiatus while I was in Crete, and I haven't really restarted. That's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. This is early February for those of you who are picking this up later.
Yeah.
So you can see some of my old content there, some of my good interviews, a few of my shorter videos where I take specific information. But I'm mostly, find me on Facebook. There's a handful of Jason Bricks on there. I'm the only one who routinely talks about heavy metal, Dungeons and Dragons, and martial arts.
Right.
There's not a lot more. And I pick a lot of political fights, which is fun. And most of the people who answer behave themselves. They're reasonably polite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those who aren't are mocked in hilarious ways.
Yeah. And when folks are following you on Facebook, we cannot forget to mention you have a novel coming out, and right now your novel is the Indulge Your Bookshelf Book Club of the Month. So tell everybody about your books and what they looking for.
The Wrestling Demons, the Bushido Chronicles series is a fun set of books about high school athletes who fight demons and have special powers and go around having adventures and making friends. And sometimes it deals with serious issues. The first book, there's a point where one of the people has been wounded, and that happens to be the only white kid in the car. And you've got a black person applying direct pressure on their wound while they get pulled over. And a cop comes up to a car with 3 people of color and 1 injured white person in the back. And they have to navigate that very, very carefully.
Yeah.
Because that is a reality.
Well, and also the relationship between the protagonist and his mother is incredibly heartfelt in a book that is at times laugh out loud funny. Like it is, I would just burst out laughing. And then I like that kind of emotional change, where it's not all, because this book's an adventure story, it all has to be lighthearted. No, like that's the touching stuff between the protagonist Connor and his mother, who is an amazing, wonderful character too. I also like YA books where the parents aren't like the villain or ancillary, like they're actually developed, real people. I love that their interchanges and the way he loves his mother and recognizes what she's done for him. She's not the evil obstacle or the passive obstacle that teenage novels often depict parents as. So yeah, I love that book. Well, and then Fighting Upstream comes out. What's the date for that one? That comes out soon.
Very soon.
So I am excited for that to drop. It is available for pre-order now, so folks should check that out. You can get your copy, but we should tell everybody a little bit about, you and I have very different kind of views of time travel, and but I love this book. So how does it give people the gist of Fighting Upstream?
So the gist is, the first book, our main character, Connor Morgan, is a high school wrestler from a economically depressed family who knows that scholarships are how he's going to get into college and break the cycle. They end up moving to a new school for reasons, and he ends up finding out that he's part of this group of teenagers with superpowers that have to fight demons. We just kind of ignore, like most books of this kind, ignore the fact that this really should be adults doing this. What the hell? We just skate by that like you do. And in the first one, they encounter one demon and have some ideas that maybe there's a larger, bigger problems to solve down the way, but they get through it. And in this next one, Connor is in the state wrestling tournament, and he knows he's getting some attention from scouts. And then in the middle of that, it turns out that their mentor, their Yoda, their Ben Kenobi, their Dumbledore, is in peril in the past. And they have to go back there and save him.
And this is where I go off on my rant. I hate time travel stories most of the time. And the reason is because if a person has the ability to decide to travel in time, why didn't they just travel back 5 minutes earlier and solve the problem? And is that 5 minutes from now going to be the solution they come to? And so I find that time travel stories totally undermine stakes. A character will die and then come back, and therefore I was tricked into believing that their death was real. I really don't like time travel or parallel universes.
Oh man, I really shouldn't have written the first chapter the way I did then.
I love this one, but it's because the character doesn't have control over it. And so it's not, oh, this is how I will solve my problem. I will also make sure I show up at just the right time to, make a different move at the state wrestling tournament and get scouted. Like not having control over the time travel is key to making sure the stakes in this one always feel like they're incredibly high, because they can't just go, oh, we solved the problem through time travel. And so it works really well. And the kind of attention to detail, I think, is it okay to give away the setting?
Sure.
I think that's really cool. So this takes place in, is it in Hiroshima or Nagasaki?
It's in Nagasaki.
It's in Nagasaki. And so right before the dropping of the atomic bomb. And so there is a kind of ticking clock sense where the characters from the future know, oh, something really bad is about to happen here. And yet they're navigating something that's very, very different. There's an attack of demons. In the first one, there's an attack of demons in Portland. How do we keep this from being a crisis at our school? And now this has become this huge, historical event is happening, and this is this other conflict we have to settle in the shadow of that, and so folks will have to check it out. It's very cool.
Well, thank you very much. I worked on that a lot. It
I-
took a long time. What was it, 7 years between volume 1 and volume 2?
Yes, well, and
Yeah.
a long
Mhm.
time in the edits, and I think that
Yeah.
is a good thing. Like that
Yeah.
shows, I'll talk to authors and they'll feel like, oh, I have to be putting out, the sequel tomorrow, or else nobody's going to read it. And I have to say to them, I've waited 17 years for a sequel once. Like that, it happens, and I would much rather wait and read a satisfying book
Yeah.
than have something feel rushed and have it be low quality. And so this
So
one,
I'm gonna
people are
go
gonna
back
really
in
like
time
it.
and make sure. I'm gonna go back in time and make sure that Patrick Rothfuss never hears you say that.
Right? Yes. There are some authors out there where I do want to kick him a little bit, and he is absolutely one of them. Oh, yeah. Is there any sense of when the next one will come out in what's
So
that
I
series
heard
called?
a rumor a while back that he was getting closer, but then I also heard that he got attached to a video game, and so I don't know if we're ever gonna get the end of King Killer. And also, I can't figure out how he's gonna resolve King Killer satisfactorily in one book.
No. We're gonna get it, and then go. That was great. When's the next one? Yeah,
Yeah.
but that
What I really
so
suspect is
well
we're kind of going through his backstory, and I think he'll end the backstory at the end of this third book, and then he had planned another trilogy where he then steps forward into the new call. And I don't think we're going to get that trilogy at all because the man's older than us.
Right. So yeah, we're finally going to get to, and now I'm ready to go on the adventure.
Yeah.
Now I'm ready to literally leave the bar. Like, as so many D&D stories are, you
Yeah.
start off in the tavern and then they go on their quest, and we've now had 2 books in the tavern.
Yeah.
And he has not left yet. Oh,
No,
yes.
and it pisses me off because he's such a good writer,
It's
and
so
Quoth
good.
is such a good character.
Yeah.
But God damn it.
Yeah.
Sorry there, YouTube.
Yeah, no, we need those books. That's a worthy goddamn it.
I'm ready to take hostages. I really am.
Yes, if folks have not checked those out, read Fighting Upstream and then start the King Killer Chronicles. But they're and it took me. I came to them so late. Like, I just read those a couple of years ago. Like, people had said, "Oh, you need to read these. You need to read these," and I was like, "Oh, yeah." And then, I was like, "Why? Why did I wait so long?" They're so. I think I had it.
Well,
in
because
my
it's a
head
book
that
the size of a concrete block.
But sometimes I like a good tome. I think I had the idea. There are some fantasy series where they're 25 books long, and you don't know when they're going to hit their stride. And I think I dropped him into that category of somebody who writes and I'd much rather read a big fat finished book than 25 of them and not know if we'll get an ending. So
It's fun.
Well, I've got some folks to thank before we get to our send-off. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided his song for our intro, the song I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to the author Stephen E. Scribner, who's the author of the Tan Fantasy series, who also makes music under the name S. Eric Scribner for his song A Poem for from the album Pianosphere. We used that during the ad break. And if you make music and would like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's music like Max's or Steven's song, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. And I cannot forget to mention Roger's Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it. Please check out Jason's Wrestling Demons and the sequel, Fighting Upstream. Tell a friend about them. Write a little review. Click on that 5th star. It makes a huge difference to authors. So make Jason's day. Write that review. And I'm too old to tell you, smash that like button for this show. But if you gently click on it an odd number of times, I would really appreciate that as well. So that brings us to our send-off. Jason, there are a couple of things that we want everybody to remember for this week. So I want people to remember all writing is political, speaking is political, not writing and not speaking is also political because silence maintains the status quo. So folks out there, use your voice to make the world a better place. And Jason, how about you? What is your reminder for everybody?
So I want to remind everybody about J.K. Rowling for a second. And I know she's a swearing word right now for good reason. But J.K. Rowling helped to raise a generation and a half of kids into adults who are courageous and loyal and know what to do with a bigot when they see one. Much to her chagrin, as it turned out. But we grew up with some people younger than us grew up with Harry Potter. We grew up with Lord of the Rings. We grew up with the Prydain Chronicles. We grew up reading fiction about a Dark Lord returning and people overcoming that through love, loyalty, courage, and the precise and measured application of violence. And I don't really believe that things happen for a reason, but I think that this generation, the people who are seeing this now, may have been accidentally training for this moment from the first time we sat on a lap and read a book.
Here's a tiny bit of our bonus segment, just for supporters of the Patreon.
Yeah, see also the three-body problem, which I've talked about so much that I'm forbidden from talking about it in front of my wife because she's bored of hearing about it.
So you talked me into reading that, and then I, once
my God.
Yes, you were the one who got me to read it, and oh my gosh, I love that series so much. And then when they, they've now got the new version, which I loved, and then there are two, I believe, Chinese versions, and I need to watch them because I got a friend of mine into them, and then she went and watched the Chinese version, and she was like, "You need to watch that. It's better in some ways." And so I need to catch up on it. But I love those books.
I'm going to tell you something that only people who've read the books are going to get it. Gonna get it all. So sorry, people who pay Patreon money for this next 5 minutes. But then we'll have other.
No, that just means pay Patreon and go read those books. That's that's legit.
The preview for one of the Chinese versions, or not the preview, but the trailer, is this animated story about these turkeys that lived in a barn, and they were dry and they were happy and they were warm and they were safe. And every morning somebody came and brought them food. And they lived like that together, and they were happy, and they were warm, and they were fed, and they were safe. And every morning, that someone brought them food, and they repeat that vibe several times. And they say, and then one morning, it was Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And if you've read Three Body Problem, you immediately go, oh no,